Welcome to Story Hour, a virtual meetup hosted by Wolf and Heron.
All right, Milo, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I just want to say this is the story I told last week. I took the criticism that I got from that story and I wrote it out. So, a razor's edge in a storm. The metal claws of my crampons on my boots dug into the ice as I stabbed my hiking poles for purchase, trying to fight the 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts that desperately tried to knock me off the side. This was do or die, literally, crossing a ridge in a storm in the Slovakian Tatra Mountains in one of the most dangerous traverses of my life. I could fall hundreds of meters down on either side over sharp ice and rocks into the valley below. As often as I could, I would glance back at my companion, a man I had met 2 nights prior who claimed to have climbed since he was 15 years old. But something was off. One second here, I lost my place. But something was off from the beginning, and now he was staggering. Before, when he saw a bear track the size of a plate, he didn't appear to recognize the danger and wandered out of sight instead of staying close. His boots, several seasons old, had holes in them. Shows that they are used, he expressed with pride. Holes that threaten frostbite at this elevation and conditions. A gust of sharp ice particles blinded me for a moment and pushed me sideways, making me hop on one leg to keep my balance. Then I looked back. He was gone. Oh, shit. Okay, I turned forward and took a few steps so I could square my stance for a better look, and as the wind beat me. No, I could not see him, and I could see the whole ridge all the way back. I stepped to one side where I could see the slope, praying now that I would not see a twisted ragdoll, and there he was. Slowly climbing down, but why? This was crazy to me. Coming down the side of a mountain is never the right thing to do, so it must have been an extreme emergency. The only safe way is on the trail, or ridge, either forwards or backwards. I had no time to think, though. The wind and cold continued to threaten me with every second. I had to make a decision, and as a mountaineer, it is my responsibility to reach a partner who is in distress. I stepped over the edge, my crampons shattering the ice, polished like a mirror by the wind. Every step had to be a punch, and the pieces of ice cascaded down hundreds of meters. My fear was real and well-founded. The slopes were not a trail. They were not packed down or cleaned. At any point, I could set off an avalanche of ice and snow, or worse, release loose rocks and cause who knows how many tons of rock to break off the side of the cliff. The ice was like a trap, too. It could be less than an inch with a hole underneath that would swallow me completely. I screamed at him, waving my arms frantically. He looked up, waved, but continued. My legs were shaking, my crampons tangled in the bushes just under the ice, sometimes pulling up a twisted, tangled mess of branches. It felt like an eternity, hundreds of meters, doing the most dangerous thing we could possibly be doing. No one could see us, and the storm did not relent. With each step, I played the mystery in my head. Any mountaineer would know how stupid this was. He was not just risking his life, he was risking mine. Whatever the emergency, it had to be incredibly urgent. He saw me now, and he could have climbed down at an angle so that we met in a V shape, but his line was straight. I had to cross over twice as much distance because of this. And it was crazy, too, because unless it threatens your life, you should regroup with your partner at the first opportunity. Then my fears materialized. I saw a place he could stop, a mound that was flat and protected. If he had an injury, he could lie down and avoid the wind. All he had to do was stop and wait, but he moved right past it. Anger blinded me. I broke the branches of the trees now, punching through the ice and snow behind him. But seasoned in such harsh conditions where emotions run hot, I knew that there was a moment that things needed to be cool. Just one moment. Instead of screaming and yelling, asking, why? I restrained myself to just a few words that could give me all the information I needed. Where are we going? And then I bit my tongue, literally. This gave him the opportunity to explain what the emergency was, what was wrong, why he just committed the most dangerous mistake next to throwing ourselves off the side. I know a hut down here. We could spend the night. And then he turned and he kept going. Not red, but white. I saw white anger in my eyes. I stood there. Now I knew I was on my own. This stranger was not with me, and he could not appreciate that he just risked my life. In mountaineering, there is no room for your ego. The only priority is getting down safely. This means clear and transparent communication on all decisions. He did not consult me. He just went for it. He didn't signal to let me know. He just went. He did not accommodate me when he saw me coming. He just, or let me know why. I stood there knowing now that I was on my own. For the next 3 hours on the trail, then 2 hours driving, I did not say anything to him. He was a stranger, and I did not know him, nor did I ever want him to be a part of my life again. I dropped him off without saying goodbye. This was my lesson. No matter who you are with, what you think of them, or how competent they say they are, when you are in the mountains, you're always on a razor's edge in a storm.
Yay! Thank you, Milo. Thank you. Okay, so today's theme is keep it real, right, Kara? Okay, good. So keep it real is one of the 4 superpowers that we talk about in our in that little one-pager thing. So we can start there, but usually what we do is we start with what was really great about Milo's story. So think a little bit about what was great and simultaneously keep it real as the superpower. Anthony, did you have something to say?
Yes, but
Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought the detail was really good, obviously, because you took the time to write it out. It was really descriptive. And it kind of had the aspect of keeping it real, where it's like knowing who somebody really is really important. And that's like the center theme is like, you need to know the true version of someone. So I think the lesson was there, the detail was there, and the story structure was all there.
Great. Any other thoughts about what? Okay, Daddy, go ahead. I mean, Stephen.
Stephen. That was much better, Milo. That was a lot tighter than last week and a lot more visceral and exciting and captivating. But there was a hole in the story, a big hole, because you never got around to explaining what was going on in that guy's head. I think actually it would be an exercise to rewrite the story from his point of view and see what he thought the errors were being made.
As much as I would love to do that, that is literally as much information as I got.
As you have.
I didn't get any more information.
Anyway, you've got real world experience and you have a story which you're keeping honest or in sync with the real world experience. But it would be, I think, interesting to go into fictional world and put yourself in that guy's head and try and tell a story, tell the same story from that other position. You know, you've just told us you don't have that other guy's real head, but it would be interesting to imagine it, and I think it might suggest things to enter into your story.
Okay. It's always interesting to look at stories from different angles, for sure. Other thoughts about what Milo did well? Go ahead, Kara. Yeah.
So specifically thinking about keep it real, and I don't have the luxury of having heard the last version of the story.
That's right.
But in some ways, maybe then I can, so it's different perspective. I thought you did a better job than I've heard you do before of letting us into actually what's going on in your head. And for some specific examples, like you showed some moments of anger. And I don't think you said I'm angry, but you were screaming, you bit your tongue, and anger is not an emotion generally that we're incredibly proud of or that we elevate. So I thought that in and of itself, like you letting us into that, it not just being frustrating or scary, but also that you were angry, and really bringing that to light, illustrating that. I think you said like white hot anger or something at one point. I thought that was some nice vulnerability on your part, and I appreciated like I was better able to imagine you going through this experience because of some of those details you shared, not just about the physical environment, but about your emotional environment. So I think that was well done and helped you keep it real.
Great. All right. What about opportunities or things that Milo can experiment with?
For me, I think you could back off on the explanation. You tended to revisit the explanation of the danger a little too much. It was kind of like, yeah, we know it's dangerous. We know it's windy. We know there's a weather. We know there's all these things. Maybe a little bit more explanation of actually. I felt like it was more a story of your confusion as to what was going on. Like you're just kind of like, I don't get it. Like what's going on here? You know, like I'm lost because this is not typical. Right? It's obviously a very atypical situation for what you're used to. You're just like, okay, it's gonna be orderly and fashionable, and this dude's like, yeah, let's go. So a little bit more maybe digging into the confusion that you're in, because anger is one thing, but anger comes from what? And so the anger has to feed from something. And I thought personally, I felt like it was more your confusion and being outside of your own box that was really the feeder of that.
Yeah, actually, Bart, I think that's a really interesting point. Anger is generally a macro emotion that follows from something subtler, like frustration or confusion, or it even comes from grief, right? And so there's a lot of there's a sub layer below the anger that is interesting to explore. I think my opportunity, actually, Milo, because I think you did a really, really great job with your visuals, was so much more visual than it was last week. So I was very easily able to picture it, even though I've never been on that mountain.
It was very cinematic.
It was very cinematic, and that was very compelling. What I wanted more of in terms of your visuals was the physiological description of the emotions. So you talked about the white, like you saw white, right? And that's like great, and then you talked about your legs shaking, and I was like, ooh, that's a good one, right? And then I'm like, could you lean into that even more as a way to kind of bring to life the specific flavor of anger that you're feeling, to Bart's point.
Just to build on both of those comments, though, before you do that, and you mentioned your story was a little bit longer and you were trying to cut it down, you kind of want to think about to what point, right? Like, why add detail? Why take away detail? And so I would consider and think about, different versions of the story. Is it because you want to talk about what it's like being on a razor's edge outside, and then bring to life moments that best illustrate that? Is it because you want to bring to life for somebody else how frustrating it can be to be in that type of environment? Like unpack that a little bit more, and or identify a few different opportunities to share this story. And then that's when you would dig into and pull out some detail over other details, for example. I think because you don't want to just make it longer.
Right. I think that's right. And to your point, the kind of the thing I pulled out that I wrote down as your main theme, and maybe this is wrong, but what I heard was you're always alone. It doesn't really matter. You're always alone. And so that's the message. If that's the message you want to drive, what are the details that help you illustrate that? Right. And then the rest of it you can cut. The idea of it being dangerous actually might not even be that relevant. It's like, unless what's important about that danger is the fact that you expect to not be alone in it. No,
this story was based on last week's theme of invite curiosity. So the goal of the story was to drive interest, so that people are kind of held on to the end. And just to kind of follow up on your last point, which is like, this seemed to be about you being alone. Honestly, I kind of just like my opening line, so I wanted to tie it up in the end. But.
And we highly recommend that, actually. Bookending your story with an opening and closing that connect to each other is a very eloquent way to wrap your story. So I encourage it.
But definitely not about being alone. I think it was just kind of like a side effect of being a mountaineering and being like, you always want to rely on yourself, even though you're with other people.
Okay.
I think that's a really interesting side. Couple things showed up for me. One, you have axes behind you and like mountain pictures. And so like I automatically trust that you're a mountaineer. So that's a great like framing. Like ice axes and stuff. So like, yeah. So I think that you did a one well-chosen spot in your house, but two, you like also can share a little bit about how did you get to that mountain with that guy and why is he there with you? And I think that allow like the trust of, I've done this before. Now you have to say prove how much you know, because I don't think that's relevant. But I think it's saying, hey, I wanted to explore. I'm up here with this person. I don't know him very well. I think that you had that last time and was missing this time about like why you should care, why you could be frustrated with someone.
Visit wolfandheron.com to find out more about our story hours.